DL office hour. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. Some technical issues. We've got four of us this time, and without any delay, let's do a quick round of intro and let's dive in. Greg, you want to start?
Yeah, sure, I'll start. So what's going on, everybody? My name's Greg.
Four of us this time. And,
I recently launched a startup called Harvey Woods, which is a blockchain management and mining company. And our big focus is taking all these disruptive technologies and figuring out how we can organize those together on the blockchain. And so we've been working now for a little over a year on working everything. And I'm super excited for this talk today because it's really important.
Awesome. Zubair?
Yeah, so I'm a software engineer. I'm studying machine learning for a couple of months now. And so looking forward to this talk.
Cool. Arthur, you want to say something about the second office hour and what you want to cover?
So this is so. By the way, I'm one of the administrators, as you know. I co-administer the group with YKIT. I think this talk, given the time we have, probably will go over what Greg want to tell us, and potentially, Subir, if you have any questions, you can also bring that up in the process. If we have time left, I also want to clarify points that we left off last time, which is I think JT Boland asked about how much he want to clarify what is the math required for researchers and developers. So I want to say like a few words about it, but probably that part will be rather quick. And of course, if you guys have any questions, you can bring that up too.
All right. So with that, Greg, let's dive in. We're curious your background. Tell the audience a little bit about that, and what you're thinking with this new venture.
All right. So my background is I've always I've been into tech. I was a baseball player in college, but in the back of the bus, I would always be learning the disruptive technologies, doing investing on that side of things, learning how to code, and kind of doing all of that. So when I kind of walked away from the baseball field, I was like, you know, I've always been really interested in blockchain, been following it forever, and I decided to just kind of go all in on it. But when it comes to AI, healthcare, and blockchain, and when those intersect, I think that if people don't know what a blockchain is, essentially it's just a distributed ledger that everyone shares as the super simple kind of way of going about it. But the beauty behind it is in order for AI to truly be successful in the healthcare space, it needs a lot of data. And so when we look at precision healthcare initiatives and genomics, the ability for us to diagnose diseases that might be completely individual, we can use AI and machine learning to identify these kind of abnormalities in the genome. And what's important, though, is how do we protect that data? How do we de-silo that data? How do we make sure that the patient is empowered with their data? And so it's not like, oh, my healthcare records are left and right. I have no control over, where my data is going. And so if we look into like what Deloitte's doing right now in the healthcare space, they're making it where the patient can basically just send over the blockchain, can just send their healthcare records right to their doctor instead of going through all of these different kind of channels and routes. And it's super empowering. And what it allows is for not only AI to come in for this precision medicine, but it also gives a layer of security over it for the patient.
Are you thinking specifically the healthcare application as you're kind of looking at what you're building?
So when it comes to the healthcare space, I think it's always important to have a solid idea on what's going on over in that space. Am I personally 100% focused on healthcare? No, not right now, because it's a very tough space to get into. But what I am kind of keeping my eye on is kind of seeing the direction of where AI and healthcare go, so I can look towards the future and say, hey, well, these are the things, how are we going to uphold, these networks of these healthcare networks? You're going to probably need mining operations that are secure and held down, that allow, a lot of clarity into what's going on with their records and stuff like that. So I try to keep these things in mind while looking at these future technologies. It's still really new. Most people don't know what a blockchain is. And so where we're at right now is kind of doing talks like this and having an environment where people can exchange ideas and talk about their expertise. And yeah.
Got it. Arthur, you had some comment a couple of days ago around, how the blockchain and AI could potentially meld together in various applications. Very early, obviously. Any comments on that?
I guess my expertise is really not on blockchain, but so this is really off-the-hand comments that I think you and I were having dinner together and we're talking about it. I guess one of the bigger issues that you can find in like deep learning or machine learning is that a lot of times have the issues of people have issues of repeating a certain experiments that other people do, and that has to do with a lot of this data. Were one, it is now in a big chunk, and so the problem is one, it's not easy to access them. So some of them can be up to like a 200 gig or 300 gig of data. So if you download them, it would take an insane amount of time, right? Another problem is, let's say if you have that chunk of data and if you want to add new things on top of it, it's actually very difficult to do so. So I guess my comment is perhaps if we could make a blockchain to be the backbone technology of this kind of data management tools that allow researchers or people around the world to create such huge database and add new things on top of it. That would be very useful. That's
Without a doubt.
That's my that's when Waikid asked me about a comment about it, and the same thing can be said for say the models you create in the process, and I'm not 100%. I don't really have very good understanding of this large scale training process, because sometimes, as you know about systems such as TensorFlow, they were using Google, and what they do is practically make the system very distributed and at the same time very efficient. So I wonder whether blockchain can do something about it. But once again, I'm not an expert, so this is just some comment I can thought of right now.
Yeah,
That's what I have.
yeah. I think what we're really seeing is the decentralization of a lot of systems. Whether it's big data and big data becoming part of everybody's life and your access to big data, but when it comes to the healthcare thing, it's so siloed and it's so difficult because in order for us to make any progress with healthcare, we not only need data over here, but we need data over here. And all this data is just everywhere. And so how do we organize it? And this is where the blockchain comes in and says, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a bunch of providers come together and have a unified ledger, and everybody can have their own individual identity in which they can stack new tests, new prescription medications, how to manage pharmacies and do this whole thing. The beauty behind AI is that it opens up the door to new treatment options, and it opens up the door to a new way of diagnosing things. But the big thing in today's world is, how do you protect it? How do you make sure that the patient is okay? And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And that's kind of what everybody's striving for. And so the blockchain offers a more secure and more streamlined kind of solution to our current healthcare database problems.
Right.
And so it isn't exactly as much as AI is going to kind of, well, they are going to combine no matter what kind of deal. But having that streamlined approach with a unified ledger that's easy to organize, that can be upkept by a bunch of contributing members, I think that's extremely powerful.
Right.
But on the other hand, we also have to make sure that the policies that we're making, not only with AI and saying, where's the line on this? Like, how far, do we want to go with this? Who's going to do what? But we also need to make sure that, on your ledger, that your ledger is your ledger, not someone else's ledger that they can go and bounce to someone else. And so coming in and saying, hey, where are these pain points here? What kind of solutions do we need to come to with the future of medicine? And how can we organize it in a way that empowers the patient?
Yep. That's a very good point. So by the way, I do have one more comment about using blockchain on the healthcare applications.
Mm-hmm.
So that might or might not related to the AI discussion, but that also block AI in general. So one of the things that kind of being an obstacle, but rightfully so. I would think that is a good thing that there's an obstacle there. Is that usually medical data is more, at least in US, is more protected by various means. So including the hospital usually have the ethical review bureau that every time a doctor wants to release certain data from patients is something that they have to go through that ERB, that ethical review bureau thing that I just mentioned. And before they can just dump private data out to the planet. And part of it, I think, is because of security issues. And I think that is a good direction to think about, because how do you create a widespread acceptance of using to allow hospital to release the data, but at the same time ensure them feel that all these things that they do is secure. And of course, from a financial perspective, they also don't want to lose their data, which is very valuable for their own research.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I feel very excited about the idea, and I feel very excited about the idea use on healthcare. But at the same time, I do see certain obstacles along the road, but it seems to be very interesting. Sorry for the long comments.
It's completely cool. Yeah, and there should be obstacles, and I think that there also should be conversation, because if communities aren't coming together and having conversations about not just, where's AI going? How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to create the policies around that where the community goes, yeah, you can't do that kind of deal? Because that's super important before we start launching things to the moon kind of deal, is making sure that talks like this happen where the community can go, hey, well, I dove into it. I came up with some good idea. Throw that out there kind of deal. What's beautiful about the blockchain is it's an immutable ledger. So patient updates so your update just says, you go, you get a diagnostic screening, or, you go do something. When the doctor puts that on your ledger, that's immutable. So that's there. So all the other doctors, it doesn't really matter which doctor it is. All the other doctors go, oh, well, here's your blood test from right here. And then it's anonymized, which is great. So without the exchange of private keys in the trustless environment confirms the identity, like third-person authentication into the data. And so I think it's another great thing is it's a real-time update on that database. So just say someone gets in a huge accident and they're getting medevaced somewhere. Doctors need to rapidly, the medevac actually rapidly needs to access your health data to make sure that they have the right approach to treating you. And so, and they need to send that data over, and this whole data storm happens, when an emergency event happens. So if we can have an immutable ledger that basically updates in real time, we can make it where just at an exchange of keys, essentially, the doctors are able to go, okay, bing, 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 this is what we're looking at here, and not have to go through any of the fudge in a more secure environment. And so I see a lot of upside to that. I also see, a lot of hurdles in that AI is potent, and it's getting more potent every day, and we're able to derive these insights, and just using images, you can diagnose skin cancer, and so this is crazy, and I project it to get even more in depth as more data comes out and more people have conversations and go, hey, did you know you could do this? And so making sure that the patient at the end of the day should be in control of their data as much as humanly possible. It's my body, it's my life, it's all of this healthcare data, is something that I do care about very strongly, and making sure that, no, you can't just, go and download my Gmail or my genome off of, Pirate Bay. Like, I don't want that, like, kind of deal. And so if I can have an encrypted network where I can store my data and I can bring in doctors into that environment and dish it out as I see fit, I think that's empowering for me. And I think it gives me a lot of options when I start looking at my health. It's cool stuff.
Switching topic a little bit, been continually a lot of developments in deep learning over the last few weeks. Arthur, any ones that excite you that you want to comment on?
You mean technology?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, there are a couple of them that I want to talk about. What Greg mentions about the Stanford group was able to detect 85% classifications accuracy on skin cancer just by using a smartphone.
That's crazy.
So I think that is a very interesting development. At this point, it is really if you look at the articles at Stanford, the current technology is still at using a certain specific device, and I don't really know the details about it. But the researchers are very keen on moving the technology to, say, using smartphone. So I think it's Ivan. He commented on the group that he's very interested to help, and you can imagine there are a lot of good things happen with those kind of technique. On the same vein, one of the members actually mentioned that he has even more data than the Stanford group. I haven't really verified what is the terms of using those data, and is he hiring or anything? But check out that particular thread. It sounds very interesting to me. I think another news that I want to say is human is still being crushed by the Pokeball, which is built by CMU Libratus. And I still don't really get any details out of it. And but more and more when you read about the DeepStack paper, you kind of guess what is the non-deep learning way that the CMU way is doing. I'm still waiting for their papers, but that sounds like my supervisor when I talk with him, he really expecting the great match between CMU and University of Alberta. So because they are the two biggest sites to do all these game-related researches, and they are rivals. So I really want to see what's going on. Yeah. there are also all these acquisition news. But Wycliffe, do you have any? What catch your eyes?
Um, I think, every week, the new models and the new frameworks and the new techniques coming out, right? I think that's going to continue for a while. You're seeing a lot of, so at least for the here and now applications, we're seeing a lot of interest in, for example, in the financial world, anomaly detection, right? So there's a lot of interest in, um, any of the banks, which today have very basic or manual anomaly detection. So that's a very low hanging fruit for them, and anyone who can actually build a behavioral classifier that way actually will get some adoption. There are a bunch of folks doing that. It's a good application, but I feel like, and again, insurance companies are looking to apply, uh, AI into claims classification and things like that. So I think a lot of sort of big industry, a lot of low hanging fruits, that people are looking to apply AI. Now, my take generally is, you know, forget AI or deep learning, right? Generally, large enterprises are still behind in applying generic machine learning. So it's going to take a while for them to figure out, what is this AI deep learning thing and how can it um, help me, right? So it's even less talent in deep learning than generic machine learning. So I think it'll take a while, and I also think that vendors and companies and people who could actually serve large companies, either as consultants or as a software platform. I think those do well generally. Um, yeah, lots of exciting stuff. You're seeing a lot of old school fields, right? Looking to apply AI. There's some example where cucumber farmers are actually applying AI. I can't quite remember the exact story, but I thought it was kind of interesting and story, good narrative, good story worthy.
I know what you're talking about. Just one quick comment. You mentioned about framework, and so one of the kind of interesting news is the news of deep water, which is from H2O.ai, and so what they do is, I believe, is in one framework they can access several lower level frameworks such as Caffe and TensorFlow.
How big of a deal is that, actually?
I don't really fully understand the enterprise world of the all these deep learning tools, but a lot of people who use H2O.ai love it because it's very simple. It's as Keith, I think his name is Keith Amelent. So he mentioned that he used a couple of times. It's all web based, and all these data can be easily transfer and share within the company.
Is there a lot of adoption on that platform?
I think so. From time to time, people try to recruit me on LinkedIn, and one of the requests is, do you know H2O.ai? And so usually my answer is, well, if you give me like a week or so, then probably I can learn it up and type of thing. And but from the standpoint of what Keith told me is really something that you don't have to have the expertise down to something like TensorFlow or Piano type of level of things. So you don't need to understand even Python, and then you can use it. So that I think that is while this is not my space, but I think this is rather exciting. And it also kind of built up one more level of the stack upward, so that more people who is not who doesn't want to learn up machine learning can actually go to use it. So that's interesting. And one more piece of news which is related. TensorFlow just released release candidate 2 for their official version 1.02. And it looks pretty interesting because there are some more advanced demos such as image localization. So it's rather interesting. And White Kid is taking a call. Yeah. Are you good now, White Kid?
Yeah, I'm good. I'll be back in a minute. Zubair, we've been doing a lot of the talking. I'm curious.
And I have some question about, speaking of frameworks, I was just going to ask for what you guys think is, what framework excites you or so far, Arthur? And have you had a chance to look at any of the new things like PyTorch has been out for a while, or Greg, also yourself? What are your thoughts on those, or any other frameworks?
Sure. Great. Maybe I would go first. Is it okay?
Go for it.
Yeah. So framework and the choice of framework is definitely one of the more frequently asked questions on the forum. And I got to say that. So let me check out what Zubair is giving a thumb up. Choosing a framework is important. It also depends on the programming language that you are proficient in. Okay, and so I am more like a Python guy, and so kind of the top frameworks that I will usually recommend to people. This will be in this order. The first will be TensorFlow, and the reason being is TensorFlow is usually the framework that has the largest community support, and is probably the one that you can find tons of examples that people have been doing research on it. Okay, and so this is also one of the few frameworks that I run through all the tutorials myself and understand what really go on. Yeah, not fully understand, but at least I have some understanding what's going on. And the disadvantage of TensorFlow, I think there are two. One is that the more advanced tutorials usually require compilation, and if you couldn't compile your TensorFlow package, you will get stuck at that point. And sometimes it's rather difficult to make the compilation working. Okay, so that is one of the disadvantage. I think the second one is, hey, White Kid, you're back. We're still talking about the different frameworks.
Okay, great.
The second point is perhaps TensorFlow is still constantly changing, and sometimes you find it very difficult to make your existing script to have forward compatibility. And I think that's because they are not really releasing their 1.0 release yet, so they kind of ignore the backward compatibility type of issues at this point. So sometimes when you write a script at earlier TensorFlow, you do need to expect that some of the functions will break compatibility in the future. Yeah, so that, from a software point of view, is not too nice, right? So that will be TensorFlow. My next two will be Theano and Torch. Those two are more like a research type of framework, and at least right now, Theano is probably the earliest framework. I think you can also run a lot of advanced tutorials such as energy-based approach on Theano easier. But the user base is actually smaller. Torch is actually not based on Python until PyTorch, right? But it is yeah, from my experience when I try it probably take you like sections or two to really walk the syntax and start to do funny things on it. Okay, and there are a couple of new network package which is really easy to use, and so I have great impressions about it. And so these three, TensorFlow, Piano, and Torch, are the three that I will recommend to people first. Um, and I would add if you want speed cafe, right? But back to your questions, because I talked too long. Okay. So for PyTorch, I think the part that really excites people, I think there are two things. One is the real-time visualization aspect of it, right? Sorry, a car come by my house, and the other part is it start to have interface with Python, which again a lot of people if they start a stack through more the TensorFlow or Piano type of stack, they are using Python anyway. So if Torch also interface with Python, I will have more intentions to use it because somehow to recommend a Torch to my say to my company or friends I know, one of the reasons a lot of them are using Python. So anyway, that's the summary. The three that I recommend are start from T, TensorFlow, Piano, Torch. The one that is very good for image processing and if you're looking for speed, Caffe. And so those are the things that get me excited. But there are more. There are close to 50 frameworks of it. My hope is to one day sample all of them, but I really can't at this point. So, but that's what I know. And these are the few that I will recommend. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks. Greg, do you have any thoughts on that?
So my whole approach is I go with Arthur on this one. Yeah, you guys are pretty powerhouse with the community and your knowledge base, and I really look to this group. This is one of my core knowledge drivers because I'm always keeping an eye out, just looking at the future and where people are working and saying, how can this work? How can we put this together? My whole approach is I'm looking at organizational frameworks. In terms of frameworks, I would agree with Arthur if you want to go with AI. TensorFlow is great with the community, and I think I think it's fantastic. I'm looking at things like how can you take this deep neural net kind of structure and how can we apply this to an organizational framework? How can we apply this to a community? How can we make it more modular so it can sit on top or things like that? And so I think it's super interesting in the space, and I think we'll see developments with social intelligence coming through as that kind of starts organizing and everything. But where I'm at in the ball game is really kind of right there saying, here's how these frameworks are, here's how a neural net's set up. How can we create an organization that basically mimics that framework? So it can be nice and modular where we know where certain organizational functions are contributing to things in a certain way and how are these things connected and how can we distribute this environment to empower as many people as we possibly can. And that's kind of the big thing with me. If you're looking for a framework on the blockchain side of things, so with AI and anything really, it comes down to transactions. Right now I'm sending voice data over to you all. You all are sending voice and image data back to me, video data. That's a transaction. And so there's a lot of transactions that we actually do that are kind of ubiquitous, where we kind of forget that we're doing this exchange. And so I think in terms of like blockchain frameworks and diving deep into stuff like that, I would recommend Solidity or Solidity. I always have a tough time saying it.
Solidity.
Yeah, Solidity. All right, right. I always have difficulty saying that. but I'll put a link onto my page if anybody wants to drop by that and dive into that whole thing. But if you're interested in smart contracts, I know Consensus is making a lot of headway on kind of the blockchain AI, thing. And so I would definitely recommend keeping your eye on Consensus, what they're doing, and especially with the Ethereum World Computer.
For Greg, if you can come up with a framework that link blockchain with machine learning methods, say, then I think that you will gain a lot of tractions in the process.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
but it's really tough.
Yeah.
And all these things are, if necessarily explode overnight, they're going to take a lot of time, like you said. And there's a lot of work to be done, and especially with other things like just making sure that the right policy is there. I mean, I'm really kind of focused on making sure that those social frameworks are in place early out of the gate, because I think it's important that people kind of have the right approach when we're building these technologies, and especially combining these technologies. I mean, we also have IoT, which is going to impact healthcare on a crazy scale. What happens to your Fitbit data? What happens to cell data? What happens to, because when we're talking about healthcare, there's a lot more that goes into health than just going to the doctor and getting a blood test. If you're out, banking records are saying that you're smoking a carton of cigarettes every day, that's gonna have some sort of impact. So how do you organize this information, but at the same time make sure that this information isn't you just kind of Google it kind of deal. And so I think I deviate a little away from frameworks, but I do think that that's important before people start just diving into blockchains too, and then throwing all this together and doing that and saying, hey, how can we make the world a better place in this process? And kind of always keeping that approach. And I think if you keep that approach and keep kind of your public service in mind, it'll be a very cool future in the next 10 years.
Hey, why can't you also mention some of the current problems being solved are like anomaly detection is really hard. What are the other areas where you guys think the challenges being solved at the moment? Any other area you think we could be actively, making some progress in terms of machine learning and deep learning?
Yeah, I mean the obvious ones are speech recognition and image object classification. But that gets applied to a lot of verticals, right? So you get very specific requirements. Big one that I think is going to be huge is autonomous vehicles, and you think about high level what's happening in autonomous vehicles. Highway driving is relatively easy, right? Because the amount of things that you gotta watch out for is relatively finite and limited. So if you're doing city driving, I mean, there's so many obstacles. Pedestrian running out. All kinds of a dog just running out in front of the car. So you have a lot of corner cases you've got to figure out, right? You've got road signs. You've got if there's a truck from Verizon parked in the middle of the street that's not moving because they are fixing some pipes or they're fixing some fiber. What happens then, right? So what's really cool actually is if there's a mode, I think some of these guys may take this approach, right? Is a human-machine hybrid, right? So my suspicion is that if you are running a set of autonomous vehicle, it's not going to be 0 to 1 on day one, right? It's not going to be fully automated on day one, right? So there are always going to be corner cases that the machine doesn't understand what to do. So I think what people may implement and what would be cool is if there's a remote control feature, right? So again, if you have the Verizon truck scenario, the machine, let's say, it doesn't recognize it, or the confidence interval is not high enough. So what happens is that when it doesn't know what to do, it phones home to some, what is essentially a NOC, right? A network operations center, where it gets assigned to a person. The person will then remote control the car around the obstacle back onto where it needs to go. Now the cool thing about that is that generates label training data, right? So the more you do that as a human-machine hybrid, the more remote data, the more label training data it generates. At some point, you actually don't need the human assistance, right? So I think we're going to start seeing more of that theme, which is sort of machine-human hybrid, right? You're not going to go from manual to automated, fully automated, but you're going to see a period of time where it's a human-machine hybrid thematically. And then at some point, they're going to flip the switch and basically says, no humans involved. So I think my take is, there are going to be a lot of companies, either vendors or customers or implementers, taking that approach. Actually, my personal guess actually gets them there much faster. And it's actually more valuable because you actually have a way to generate proprietary training data that way. So I'll stop right there. But lots of applications, right? Finance, healthcare, transportation, e-commerce. An obvious one is anomaly detection, fraud detection, right? So if you're in e-commerce, when do you flag a transaction that may be fraudulent versus not? And this is especially true if you are a PayPal, you're an Amazon, and the like, where you just can't manually deal with the volume today. So anyway, looks like we are at time. I've got some of them may be a hard stop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop streaming, and we can continue some of this conversation maybe in the next session. You guys have done a great job walking through some of these areas. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Wai-Kit.
If you guys can stay on just for a couple more minutes, that would be great. I'm just going to stop streaming now.